Hi, I'm Dr. Daviso from the University of Akron, and welcome to my video series on using apps in special education. I put this video series together because we need to help our students meet that third grade reading guarantee. And I spoke to many practicing teachers at conferences such as OCALI, DCDT, and CEC, and there is a tremendous need for apps in these specific areas. The apps I'm going to be focusing on will be displayed for you to improve services, delivering instruction in English and language arts, kindergarten through third grade, math skills K through 5, data collection methods, general classroom management techniques, communication with parents, and focus on a number of transition skills. But before we get to all of those, let me tell you how I'm going to set these apps up for you and how you could choose the best apps that would be appropriate for your students. The first model we're going to look at is called the TPACK model. This model was put together a few years ago, and it is a nice combination to see how your content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and technology knowledge can be put together to make your classroom a more interactive and interesting place for the students you serve. So let's check this one out. When it comes to TPACK, the first thing they're looking at is content knowledge. And this content knowledge includes concepts, theories, conceptual frameworks, as well as the knowledge about accepted ways of developing learning within our students. You're going to be an expert in your content area, whether it be math, English language arts, or even special education. The second part of this is pedagogical knowledge, and this is the knowledge you have about how students learn, specifically the students in your classroom. How do you approach them? What teaching approaches work the best? What methods of assessment are you going to use? And do you have knowledge about the different theories of learning and how it applies to your specific classroom? And of course, the third component is the technological part, which I'm going to try to better educate you on. This is within the context of technology integration in your schools. And it appears most often to refer to your digital technologies in the classroom, such as laptops, the internet, and software applications. So why did I choose to focus on apps specifically? We know that there is a digital divide within our schools. A lot of schools might not have access to the highest speed internet for video technology. Some of our students might not have internet access at home. And we're going to talk about how we can overcome this through the use of apps at the end of the description of this model when we look at the context for learning. Well, let's look and see how these three areas overlap. When it comes to PCK on that diagram, the PCK looks at the pedagogical content knowledge, and this is how are you going to combine pedagogy and content effectively. Do you know how to make the subject matter understandable for the learners in your classroom? And this is going to include picking up knowledge on student interests and student learning styles. Another area of overlap is the technological content knowledge. And this is where you look at how can technology be used to provide new ways of teaching the content. For instance, digital animation makes it possible for students to conceptualize and see how the human digestive system works. In special education, we could use the digital animation or digital video to provide examples of community jobs or community skills focusing on behavior. The third area of overlap looks at technological and pedagogy. Are you able to use different teaching approaches to engage your learners? It's all about keeping students actively engaged. And our overall goal is to get to the center where we have technology, pedagogy, and content all working together and have a better understanding of the complexity of the relationships between your student, the teachers in your classroom, the content, and technology. Figuring out you're going to know the best mix for your content area. And if you can see the circle that's surrounding this entire chart, this focuses on the context. Like I said, some schools might have limited access to technology. The reason I chose the iPad is I think this is an ideal tool. Once you download these applications, You don't need to be connected to the internet. The students would be able to take these home and have a more effective educational intervention. Many of these apps can provide what we call self-directed activities. It could also provide them some additional self-correcting activities where they can become better learners, where they can become more actively engaged. And let's face it, these apps are fun and engaging in many cases. All right, now let's look at another model to help us better differentiate our instruction in the classroom. This is the RTI, or response to intervention approach. Now, before I move on to this, I want to make sure you know that there's no single absolute definition of RTI. With response to intervention, schools identify students that are at risk for poor learning outcomes. They use this to monitor student progress. They also use this to provide evidence-based interventions based on the student's needs. And this also helps us adjust the intensity and the nature of those interventions. And that's why I'm going to focus these applications on helping you provide some more direct interventions to students that are struggling with specific areas of content. So this is divided into 3 specific tiers. Let's look at the first tier. Tier 1 involves 75 to 85% of our student population. All students are going to be receiving classroom instruction that is differentiated and utilizes strategies and materials that are scientifically research-based. I'm going to talk a little bit about the SAMR approach for categorizing apps. I want to make sure these apps have some validity to them that will help improve student learning in your classroom. When we move on to the second tier, these are students that might need some supplemental interventions, and this may occur within or outside the general education classroom. And this is going to involve progress monitoring at much more frequent levels to make sure we're getting these students back on track. However, if Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions haven't worked, we're going to move on to Tier 3 interventions, which involves approximately 5 to 10% of our student population. These are students who are going to require more intense and explicit and individualized instruction because they haven't shown sufficient response to our earlier interventions. These students may also be targeted or identified as needing individualized educational services. All right, when we look at the intensity of the instruction, I want you to notice it increases as we move to the top of the pyramid. In Tier 1, any necessary interventions are going to be within the framework of the general classroom. In Tier 2, this type of targeted instruction is typically for about 30 minutes per day, maybe 2 to 4 days a week, and this is going to take place over a minimum of 9 weeks. This is where you can really use the power of apps to help your students catch up, or maybe use apps to differentiate instruction for each of your students. There's also apps available for Tier 3 intervention. This is going to be a targeted intervention and is delivered for a minimum of 2 30-minute sessions every week for 9 to 12 weeks. It's much more intense. This is where we look at smaller groups, maybe more one-on-one instruction, more targeted instruction designed to meet the learner's specific needs. All right, now that we've talked about TPAC and RTI, how am I going to classify these apps and explain them for you as we go on? I'm going to align them to the Common Core, but first I want you to understand the SAMR model. This was used for the classification of applications, and you will see each one of the apps I discuss talked about within this category. Here's the model as it stands. You can see the first 2 levels, the yellow and the orange, are there for enhancement. The blue and green look at how our educational approaches can be transformed. Let's take a closer look. The first level is substitution, and these apps basically act as a direct tool substitute. There's really no functional improvement. It would just be like having a clock on your app. Yep, you can see it. It tells the time, really not that big of a deal. Or flashcards, just simply checking to see if memorization has taken place. However, when we move on to the next level, these apps are augmented. It acts as a direct tool substitute with some functional improvement, meaning that these applications may also be collecting data while students are doing some self-correcting materials. It might add some additional interaction with the material between the student and the material. As we move on to transformation, this is called a modification. Technology allows for a significant task redesign, and we'll talk about those in the context of each of the apps we discuss. And the top level is redefinition. Not many apps reach this level, but this is technology that will allow for tasks that have been previously inconceivable. The way I look at it, this would be, for instance, students being able to connect to a classroom around the world and work on an assignment together. So we'll talk about apps in terms of what level of on the SAMR scale are they and how they can be effective for helping your students gain the needed information. All right, so how am I going to do this? We're going to look at the RTI, the TPACK model, and the SAMR model. And we're going to try to connect those so we could have more apps at our fingertips that are aligned to meet the Common Core standards. So what areas am I going to focus on? I'm going to focus on English and Language Arts, mathematics, and transition. In future videos, I will be discussing each one of these. I'll give you a brief presentation of the application, its price, and the SAMR level it seems to be indicating. I tried to keep most of the apps free or under the cost of $3. I look forward to working with you through these video presentations. If you have any questions or concerns, or come up with an app that you think is really exciting and new that I haven't presented, please contact me at the information below. Thanks again for watching. See you again real soon.